The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Zara Washington's hand flew to her burning cheek, her 6-month pregnant belly making it hard to steady herself in the wooden chair. The blonde woman standing over her had fire in her green eyes, her manicured hands still raised from delivering the slap that would change everything. "How dare you try to take what's mine?" Scarlet Rivers screamed, her designer dress wrinkled from pushing past the court officers. "Theo belongs with me, not some pregnant nobody." The entire courtroom erupted in chaos. Lawyers jumped to their feet, court officers rushed forward, and spectators gasped in shock. But Zara's eyes weren't on any of them. She was staring at her husband, Theodore Blackwood, the billionaire tech mogul who was supposed to love and protect her. He stood frozen behind Scarlet, not moving to help his pregnant wife. "Order. Order in my court." Judge Robert Washington's gavel crashed down repeatedly, his deep voice cutting through the noise. Behind his black robes and stern expression, something flickered in his dark eyes as he looked at the pregnant woman holding her cheek. Zara tried to stand, her hands supporting her swollen belly. The baby inside her kicked frantically, as if sensing the stress flooding her mother's body. She had come to court today thinking this would be a simple divorce proceeding. She never expected Theo's mistress to storm in and assault her in front of everyone. "Mrs. Rivers, you are in contempt of this court," Judge Washington said, his voice deadly calm. "Officers, escort her out immediately." "No!" Scarlet shrieked, fighting against the officers trying to restrain her. "She's trying to steal my man. She's trying to take half of everything that should be mine." Zara felt sick. Not just from the pregnancy, but from watching Theo finally move not to comfort her, but to reach for Scarlet's arm. "Baby, please," he said to his mistress, completely ignoring his wife. "Let's handle this properly." The courtroom fell silent except for Scarlet's continued protests as she was dragged toward the exit. Judge Washington's eyes moved between Theo and Zara, taking in every detail. The way Theo showed more concern for his mistress than his pregnant wife. The way Zara stood alone, abandoned by the man who had promised to love her forever. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said slowly, "is this woman your wife?" Theo barely glanced at Zara. "We're getting divorced, Your Honor. That's why we're here. I asked if she is your wife, not about your future plans." A long pause. "Yes, she is." "And you're the father of her child?" Another pause, this one longer. "Yes." Judge Washington leaned back in his chair, studying the scene before him. 28 years old, beautiful despite her distress, pregnant and alone. The woman in front of him looked exactly like someone he once knew. Someone he had lost through his own pride and stubbornness. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said gently, "do you need medical attention?" Zara finally found her voice. "No, Your Honor. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. She had discovered her husband's affair 3 months ago when she found text messages on his phone. Love messages to Scarlet Rivers, the socialite daughter of a restaurant chain owner. Messages that said he was only staying married until after the baby was born to avoid bad publicity. The betrayal had cut deep, but she thought she could handle a civilized divorce. She never imagined it would come to this, being attacked by her husband's pregnant mistress while he did nothing to protect her. Judge Washington's assistant whispered something in his ear. He nodded and looked back at the room. "This court will recess for 15 minutes. Mr. Blackwood, I expect you to control your friend. Any further disruptions will result in serious consequences." As people filed out of the courtroom, Zara remained in her seat. Her lawyer and best friend, Nina Brooks, rushed to her side. "Zara, are you okay? We should press charges." "I just want this over with," Zara whispered, still touching her cheek. The sting had faded, but the humiliation burned bright. She looked toward the exit where Theo was comforting Scarlet, whispering in her ear and stroking her hair. Judge Washington watched from his bench, making notes but really studying Zara's face. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same dark eyes, same delicate features, same proud way of holding herself even when hurt. He had seen that look before 28 years ago, when he had chosen his career over his family. When he had walked away from his pregnant girlfriend because he thought a baby would ruin his chances of becoming a judge. When he had abandoned Zara and her mother without ever looking back. Now his daughter sat in his courtroom, pregnant and abandoned by another man, and she had no idea who was about to decide her fate. The irony wasn't lost on him. Theo Blackwood, the arrogant billionaire who had just chosen his mistress over his pregnant wife, had no idea he was about to face the judgment of the woman he had wronged's father. A father who had spent 28 years regretting the worst decision of his life. A father who was about to make sure his daughter finally got the justice she deserved. Judge Washington smiled slightly as he made more notes. Theo Blackwood was about to learn that some mistakes come with a very high price. The courthouse bathroom felt like a sanctuary compared to the chaos of the courtroom. Zara splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm down for the baby's sake. Her reflection stared back at her brown skin flushed from stress, dark curls escaping from her neat bun, and eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. Nina Brooks stood beside her, fury radiating from every inch of her petite frame. "I can't believe that woman hit you. And I can't believe Theo just stood there." "I can," Zara said quietly, drying her hands. "He stopped caring about me the moment he started caring about her." The affair had begun 6 months ago at a charity gala. Zara had been home with morning sickness, trusting her husband to represent their architecture firm at the event. Instead, he had spent the evening charming Scarlett Rivers, the party-loving socialite who collected rich men like handbags. What started as flirtation became something more. Secret lunches, weekend trips disguised as business meetings, expensive gifts that Zara only discovered when going through credit card statements. The worst part wasn't even the cheating, it was the way Theo had started treating her like a stranger in her own home. "We need to get back in there," Nina said, checking her watch. "But first, tell me honestly, are you okay? The baby?" Zara placed both hands on her belly, feeling the gentle movements of her daughter. "She's active, so that's good. But Nina, I can't do this. I can't sit in that room and watch him choose her over and over again. You don't have a choice. This divorce needs to happen, and we need to secure your future and your daughter's future. Theo has assets worth over $200 million. Half of that is yours." Through the bathroom door they could hear voices in the hallway. Theo's deep voice mixed with Scarlett's higher pitch, and they sounded like they were arguing. "Maybe she learned her lesson," Nina said hopefully. They opened the door to see Theo and Scarlett in heated conversation near the water fountain. Scarlett's perfect makeup was smeared, her blonde hair disheveled from her dramatic entrance. "You promised me this would be simple," Scarlett was saying. "You said she wouldn't fight it." "She's not fighting it," Theo replied, running a hand through his dark hair. "She wants the divorce as much as I do." "Then why is she asking for so much money? Half of everything? That's my money too now." Zara stopped walking. "Your money?" They weren't even divorced yet, and Scarlett was already claiming ownership of assets that belonged to a marriage she had helped destroy. Theo noticed Zara standing there. For a moment, something that might have been guilt flashed across his face. "Zara, about what happened in there. Don't." Zara held up her hand. "Just don't." Scarlett was upset. "She didn't mean. She slapped your pregnant wife, Theo. She slapped me and you did nothing." Zara's voice was steady, but Nina could see her hands shaking. "You stood there and watched another woman attack the mother of your child." Scarlett rolled her eyes. "Oh please, it was hardly an attack. You're being dramatic." The words hung in the air like poison. Zara stared at this woman who had destroyed her marriage, who had just assaulted her in court, and who was now dismissing it like it meant nothing. "You're right," Zara said finally. "It wasn't an attack. It was a gift." Both Theo and Scarlett looked confused. "You showed everyone in that courtroom exactly who you are," Zara continued. "You showed the judge, the lawyers, the court reporter, everyone. You showed them that you're the kind of person who hits pregnant women. And Theo, you showed them that you're the kind of man who lets it happen." She turned to walk back toward the courtroom, Nina beside her. "Zara, wait," Theo called out. "We can work this out. We don't need to make this messy." She turned back and for the first time in months she really looked at her husband. The man she had fallen in love with 5 years ago, the brilliant entrepreneur who had swept her off her feet with his ambition and charm. When had he become this stranger who could watch her get hurt and feel nothing? "It's already messy, Theo. You made it messy when you decided our marriage meant nothing. You made it messier when you chose her over your own family. And she made it messiest of all when she put her hands on me." Back in the courtroom, Judge Washington was reviewing files at his desk. When the parties returned, he noticed everything. The way Theo sat closer to Scarlett than to his own wife. The way Scarlett kept touching Theo's arm possessively. The way Zara sat alone, her lawyer beside her but clearly having no support from her husband. "Before we continue," the judge said, "I want to address what happened earlier. Mrs. Rivers, assault is a serious crime, especially against a pregnant woman. However, I understand Mrs. Blackwood does not wish to press charges at this time." Scarlett smirked, thinking she had gotten away with it. "However," Judge Washington continued, "this incident will be noted in the court record and will be considered during these proceedings. The smirk faded from Scarlett's face. Now, Mr. Blackwood, I've reviewed the preliminary financial statements your lawyer provided. Your net worth is listed at $215 million, is that correct? Approximately, yes, Your Honor. And Mrs. Blackwood is asking for 50% of marital assets, plus child support and alimony. Your Honor, Theo's lawyer stood up, my client believes that 50% is excessive given the short duration of the marriage. 4 years, Judge Washington said, reading from the file. 4 years of marriage, during which Mrs. Blackwood worked as a partner in their joint architecture firm, contributing both labor and reputation to their shared success. Zara blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected the judge to be so well informed about her professional contributions. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mrs. Blackwood is currently pregnant with Mr. Blackwood's child, which adds additional considerations to this case. He looked directly at Theo. Mr. Blackwood, do you intend to be an active father to this child? Theo glanced at Scarlett before answering. Of course, Your Honor. And will Mrs. Rivers be involved in the child's life? The question hung heavy in the air. Scarlett shifted uncomfortably, clearly not having considered the reality of stepmotherhood. We haven't discussed the details yet, Theo admitted. Judge Washington made more notes. I see. Well, Mr. Blackwood, I suggest you discuss those details carefully. The decisions you make now will affect this child for the rest of their life. As the hearing continued, Zara found herself studying the judge. There was something familiar about him, something in the way he looked at her with what seemed like more than professional interest. His questions were thorough, his attention to detail impressive, and his concern for her welfare seemed almost personal. She had never seen him before, she was sure of it. But the way he spoke, the way he tilted his head when he was thinking, it reminded her of someone. It reminded her of herself. Judge Robert Washington sat in his chambers long after the courthouse had emptied, staring at the file in front of him. Zara Washington Blackwood. The name felt strange on the official documents, his daughter's name hyphenated with that of a man who had just proven himself unworthy of her. 28 years ago, he had been a young prosecutor with big dreams and a pregnant girlfriend named Linda Washington. Linda had been a nurse, kind and patient and everything good in the world. When she told him she was pregnant, his first thought hadn't been joy, it had been panic. How could he become a judge with the responsibility of a baby? How could he focus on his career with a family to support? So he had made the worst decision of his life. He had left. He told himself it was better for everyone. Linda was strong, she could raise the child alone. He would send money, of course, but from a distance. He wouldn't be tied down by domestic responsibilities that might hurt his chances of appointment to the bench. The money had been sent faithfully for 18 years, but he had never once called or visited. He had heard through mutual friends that Linda had named the baby Zara, that she had grown up smart and talented, that she had become an architect. But he had never tried to make contact. Now, 28 years later, his daughter was sitting in his courtroom, going through the same abandonment he had put her mother through. The irony was crushing. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. His clerk, James, entered with a stack of files. Judge, I have the research you requested on Blackwood Industries. Robert had asked James to pull any cases or investigations involving Theo's companies. What came back was interesting. There have been 3 complaints filed with the SEC in the past 2 years, James reported. All dismissed due to lack of evidence, but the pattern is concerning. Questions about tax shelters, offshore accounts, and some questionable business practices. Robert flipped through the documents. Who filed the complaints? Former employees mostly. People who claimed they witnessed fraudulent activities but couldn't prove it. This was exactly what Robert had hoped to find. James, I want you to do something for me, but keep it quiet. Reach out to your contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Ask them if they have any ongoing interest in Blackwood Industries. Sir, is that appropriate? Given that Mr. Blackwood's case is in your court. Robert looked at his clerk seriously. James, I'm not asking them to open an investigation. I'm asking if one already exists. There's a difference. If there are federal crimes being committed, this court needs to know about it, especially when it involves assets that are part of a divorce settlement. After James left, Robert opened his personal laptop and did something he had never done before. He searched for information about his daughter. What he found impressed him. Zara had graduated from Howard University with honors, then earned her master's degree from MIT. She had worked for several prestigious architectural firms before starting her own company with Theo 5 years ago. Their firm, Blackwood & Associates, had won several awards for innovative design. But more than her professional success, Robert was impressed by her character. There were articles about her volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity, her mentorship program for young women in architecture, her scholarship fund for underprivileged students. She had grown up to be everything he had hoped she would be, without any help from him. Meanwhile, across town, Zara was dealing with the aftermath of the court hearing. She sat in her downtown apartment, the one she had moved into when she discovered Theo's affair, surrounded by architectural drawings and baby furniture that still needed to be assembled. Nina had insisted on staying the night, worried about Zara being alone after the stress of the day. She was in the kitchen making tea when Zara's phone rang. "It's Theo," Zara said, looking at the caller ID. "Don't answer it," Nina called from the kitchen. But Zara was curious. What could he possibly want to say now? "Hello, Theo." "Zara, we need to talk. What happened today? It got out of hand." "You think?" "Scarlett didn't mean to hurt you. She was just emotional." Zara closed her eyes. Even now he was defending her. "Theo, she slapped me. In court. While I'm carrying your child. I know, and I'm sorry. But can we please just work this out between us? We don't need lawyers and judges making decisions about our family." "Our family?" Zara almost laughed. "Theo, you chose your family when you chose her. I'm just the ex-wife now. You don't have to be. We could try again. For the baby's sake." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, just a moment, Zara felt the old pull of their history together. The good times, the shared dreams, the love that had felt so real. Then she remembered the look on his face when Scarlett had hit her. The way he had reached for his mistress instead of his wife. "No, Theo. We can't try again. Some things can't be fixed." "So you're really going to take half of everything? Even though you left me?" "I left you because you were cheating on me." "That's not how I remember it." Zara felt something cold settle in her chest. "How do you remember it?" "I remember you getting distant during the pregnancy. Moody. Hard to live with. Scarlett was just there for me when you weren't." The rewriting of history was breathtaking. He was actually blaming her for his affair. "Goodbye, Theo." She hung up and sat in the quiet of her apartment, feeling the baby move inside her. Tomorrow she would start over completely. No more shared business, no more shared home, no more shared life. Just her and her daughter against the world. What she didn't know was that across town, Judge Robert Washington was making sure she wouldn't have to fight alone. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 28 years. "Linda? It's Robert. I know it's been a long time, but I saw Zara today and we need to talk." The phone call had lasted 3 hours. 28 years of silence broken by a single conversation that changed everything. Linda Washington, now Linda Martinez, remarried to a kind man who had helped raise Zara, had been shocked to hear from Robert. But when he explained what he had witnessed in court, her protective mother instincts had overridden her anger at his abandonment. "She doesn't know about you," Linda had said. "I told her you were a lawyer who died when she was young. I couldn't bear to tell her that her father chose his career over her." "I deserve that," Robert had admitted. "But Linda, she's in trouble now. Real trouble. And I'm in a position to help her, but I need to do it carefully." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that comes from marrying a man who might be a criminal." Now, 2 days after that conversation, Robert sat across from FBI agent Patricia Mills at a small cafe downtown. Pat was an old friend from his prosecutor days, someone he trusted completely. "Bobby, what you're asking me could get us both in trouble," Pat said, stirring her coffee. "You want me to tell you if we have an active investigation into someone whose divorce case is in your court? I want you to tell me if there are federal crimes being committed that I need to know about as the presiding judge. Pat, this man's wife is 6 months pregnant, and she's about to be awarded a settlement that could be based on fraudulent assets." Pat studied her old friend's face. "This is personal for you somehow." It wasn't a question. Robert sighed. "She's my daughter, Pat. The one I told you about years ago. The one I walked away from." Pat's expression softened. "Oh, Bobby. I can't change what I did 28 years ago. But I can make sure she gets what she deserves now. So tell me, is Theodore Blackwood under investigation?" Pat was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thin file. "Officially, I can't discuss ongoing investigations," she said carefully. "But unofficially, if a federal judge needed to know that certain assets might be seized in the near future, that would be information relevant to a divorce settlement." Robert opened the file. What he read made his blood run cold. Theodore Blackwood wasn't just cheating on his taxes, he was running what appeared to be an elaborate shell company scheme. Money was being funneled through offshore accounts, false expenses were being claimed, and employees were being paid under the table to avoid tax obligations. How much are we talking about? Robert asked. Conservative estimate? 15 million in tax evasion over the past 5 years. But it could be higher. We're still investigating. When will arrests be made? Could be weeks, could be months. We're building a solid case. Robert closed the file and handed it back. Pat, I need you to do something for me. When you arrest him, I want to be notified immediately. And I want to make sure his assets are frozen before he can hide anything else. Bobby, you're walking a fine line here. I know. But my daughter is about to give birth to his child. If his assets get seized after the divorce is finalized, she could end up with nothing. If they get seized before, she might have a claim to the legitimate assets. Pat nodded slowly. I'll see what I can do. Meanwhile, Zara was dealing with problems of her own. The stress of the divorce and the incident in court had been affecting her work. 3 potential clients had canceled meetings, citing personal concerns about the negative publicity surrounding her case. She was reviewing financial projections in her temporary office when Nina burst in with a newspaper. Have you seen this? Nina demanded, slapping the paper down on Zara's desk. The headline read, Pregnant Wife Attacked in Court by Billionaire's Mistress. Below it was a photo of Zara holding her cheek, with Theo and Scarlett in the background. How did they get this photo? Zara asked, horrified. Someone in the courtroom must have had a phone. Zara, this is actually good news. How is this good news? Because it makes Theo look terrible and you look sympathetic. Public opinion matters in high-profile divorces. If he wants to maintain his business reputation, he'll want to settle quickly and quietly. But Zara wasn't thinking about settlements or public opinion. She was thinking about her daughter, who would someday be old enough to search the internet and find this photo. Who would see her mother being humiliated and her father allowing it to happen. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the paper. You deserve better. A friend. She showed it to Nina, who frowned. That's weird. How did they get your number? Before Zara could answer, her phone rang. It was her doctor's office. Mrs. Blackwood? Dr. Peterson would like to see you this afternoon. Your blood pressure was elevated at your last visit, and with the stress you've been under. Another complication. Another reminder that she wasn't just responsible for herself anymore. That evening, Zara sat in her apartment assembling a crib she had bought months ago when her marriage still seemed salvageable. The instructions were in 3 languages, none of which seemed to match the actual pieces in the box. She was struggling with what appeared to be side panel J when there was a knock at her door. Through the peephole, she saw a delivery man with a large flower arrangement. I didn't order flowers, she told him through the door. They're from a secret admirer, he said with a smile. Says here to tell you that justice is coming. Justice is coming? Who would send such a strange message? She tipped the delivery man and carried the flowers inside. They were beautiful white roses and baby's breath arranged in a crystal vase that must have cost hundreds of dollars. The card simply said, for Zara. Justice is coming. A friend who cares. Nina arrived an hour later to find Zara staring at the flowers with confusion. Someone is either very romantic or very creepy, Nina observed. Any idea who sent them? None. But Nina, what if it's connected to the text earlier? What if someone is watching me? Or what if someone is trying to help you? Zara, you have more friends than you realize. Maybe someone who knows something about Theo wants to make sure you're okay. What neither of them knew was that across town, Judge Robert Washington was reading bedtime stories to Linda Martinez's youngest son Zara's half-brother while Linda prepared guest room for him. He had asked to stay with them while he figured out how to help his daughter without revealing his identity too soon. Linda had agreed, understanding that some mistakes take decades to fix. Uncle Robert, 8-year-old Carlos said, why do you look sad when you read the happy parts? Robert smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. Sometimes grown-ups think about things that happened a long time ago, buddy. But reading to you makes me happy. After Carlos fell asleep, Robert and Linda sat in the kitchen talking about Zara's case. She's strong, Linda said. Stronger than I was at her age. But Bobby, she's scared. She's about to be a single mother with a man who's trying to take everything from her. Not if I have anything to say about it, Robert said grimly. Linda, I need to tell you something. Theodore Blackwood is about to have bigger problems than a divorce. He told her about his conversation with the FBI agent, about the investigation, about the evidence of fraud. How long have you known about this? Linda asked. I suspected something was wrong when I saw how he acted in court. Men don't usually choose their mistresses over their pregnant wives unless they're already planning to run. So I did some digging. Linda stared at him. Bobby, you could get in trouble for this. I should have gotten in trouble 28 years ago for walking away from you and Zara. This is me trying to make up for that. It won't bring back the years you missed. No, it won't. But maybe it can save her future. What Robert didn't know was that at that very moment, Theodore Blackwood was in his penthouse apartment, frantically moving money between accounts while Scarlett painted her nails and planned their trip to a non-extradition country. The net was closing in faster than anyone realized. The law office of Jenkins and Associates buzzed with morning energy as Zara walked through the glass doors, her hand resting on her 8.5-month belly. Her daughter was due any day now, but Zara refused to let that stop her from attending this crucial meeting. "You're glowing," said Thomas Jenkins, Nina's senior partner, as he greeted her in the conference room. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm carrying a bowling ball that likes to kick," Zara replied, settling carefully into the chair Nina had equipped with extra cushions. Nina spread documents across the table. "Okay, here's where we stand. The judge has been very thorough in his asset evaluation. Almost suspiciously thorough." "What do you mean suspiciously?" Zara asked. "I mean Judge Washington seems to know more about Theo's business dealings than most federal investigators. Look at this." Nina pointed to a section of the court order. "He's requesting documentation going back 7 years, including all offshore holdings, shell company investments, and tax shelter arrangements." Zara frowned. "Is that normal?" "It's comprehensive," Thomas said diplomatically. "Your case is getting the kind of attention usually reserved for major criminal investigations." "Maybe because Theo's behavior in court was so outrageous," Zara suggested. "I mean, letting his mistress attack his pregnant wife can't have made a good impression." What Zara didn't know was that Judge Washington had spent the past week having very careful conversations with very specific people. His FBI contact had been busy, and the information she shared painted a picture of Theodore Blackwood as a man who had been stealing from the government for years. "There's something else," Nina said, pulling out another folder. 3 more of Theo's former employees have come forward with information about irregularities in company bookkeeping. They're willing to testify. Testify to what? That Theo was paying them cash under the table, claiming business expenses that were actually personal purchases, and using company funds for gifts to Scarlett. Zara felt the baby kick hard as if responding to the stress. So he was stealing from his own company to pay for his affair? It looks that way. Zara, this changes everything. If he's been committing fraud, those assets could be seized by the government. We need to make sure your settlement is secured before that happens. The meeting was interrupted by Zara's sharp intake of breath and her hand flying to her side. "Zara?" Nina asked, alarmed. I think it's time," Zara said, breathing heavily as another contraction hit. Nina immediately sprang into action. "Thomas, call an ambulance." "Zara, breathe with me. In and out just like we practiced." 20 minutes later, Zara was in the back of an ambulance, holding Nina's hand as they raced toward the hospital. The contractions were coming fast now, and all thoughts of divorce proceedings and asset seizures faded away. Her daughter was ready to meet the world. At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Dr. Peterson was waiting for them, and within hours, Zara was holding a perfect, healthy baby girl in her arms. "Have you chosen a name?" the nurse asked, preparing the birth certificate. Zara looked down at her daughter's tiny face. She had planned to name her Grace after Theo's grandmother, but looking at this beautiful child who had survived months of stress and uncertainty, she chose differently. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope Washington." "Not Hope Blackwood?" Nina asked, surprised. "No. She's a Washington. She's mine." What Zara didn't know was that at that exact moment, Judge Robert Washington was in his chambers, staring at a text message from Linda. "Your granddaughter was born this afternoon. Her name is Hope." His granddaughter. The word hit him like a physical blow. He had missed his daughter's childhood, but he was not going to miss his granddaughter's. Meanwhile, Theo was having the worst day of his business life. The detailed financial review ordered by the court had uncovered irregularities that his accountant couldn't explain. His lawyer was asking uncomfortable questions, and 3 different government agencies had requested meetings. "We need to postpone the divorce proceedings," his lawyer, Richard Sterling, advised, "until we can sort out these financial issues." "Absolutely not," Theo said firmly. "I want this marriage over. Give her whatever she's asking for, just make it quick." "Theo, you're not understanding the gravity of the situation. If even half of these irregularities are real, you could be facing federal charges." "That's impossible. I have the best accountants money can buy." "The best accountants money can buy are the same ones who set up these questionable structures. Theo, you need to prepare for the possibility that some of your assets might be frozen. Scarlett, who had been listening from the corner of Theo's office, suddenly looked up from her phone. Frozen? What do you mean frozen? I mean the government could seize assets that were obtained through fraudulent means, Sterling explained. But that's my money too now, Scarlett protested. We're going to be married as soon as his divorce is final. Sterling gave her a look that could have frozen hell. Miss Rivers, you have no legal claim to any of Mr. Blackwood's assets. And given your behavior in court, I'd suggest you keep a very low profile. That evening, Zara sat in her hospital bed, holding hope and feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in months. Her daughter was perfect 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a grip strong enough to hold onto Zara's finger like she never intended to let go. Nina had gone home to get some rest, but not before ensuring that a security guard was posted outside Zara's room. They weren't taking any chances with Scarlett Rivers still on the loose. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. To her surprise, it was Judge Washington, still in his judicial robes, carrying a small gift bag. Your Honor? Zara said, confused. What are you doing here? I heard about the birth, he said gently. I wanted to make sure you and the baby were doing well. That's very kind of you, but how did you know I was here? Judge Washington stepped closer to the bed, his eyes filling with tears as he looked at his granddaughter for the first time. Mrs. Blackwood, Zara, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I don't understand. He set the gift bag down and sat in the chair beside her bed. 28 years ago, I was a young prosecutor with big dreams and a pregnant girlfriend. I was ambitious and selfish and scared that a family would ruin my chances of becoming a judge. Zara's heart started beating faster. Judge Washington, I don't think. So I left, he continued, his voice breaking. I walked away from the best thing that ever happened to me because I thought my career was more important. I sent money but I never called. Never visited. Never tried to be the father you deserved. The room fell silent except for the soft sounds of Hope sleeping. My father died when I was young, Zara whispered. No, he didn't. He was a coward who chose his job over his family. And now, 28 years later, he's sitting in this hospital room, looking at his daughter and granddaughter, and realizing that he spent his whole life trying to fix the wrong he did to you. Tears were streaming down Zara's face. You're my father? I'm the man who should have been your father. I don't deserve that title now. Zara looked down at Hope, then back at the man who had just turned her world upside down. Does this mean, the case? The case will be handled with complete fairness and professionalism. But Zara, what Theodore Blackwood did to you in that courtroom, choosing his mistress over his pregnant wife, it reminded me of the worst mistake I ever made. And I swore that I would not let you suffer the same abandonment I put you through. You can't make legal decisions based on personal feelings. I'm not. I'm making them based on facts and evidence. Theodore Blackwood is about to face justice for his crimes, and you and Hope are going to be protected in the process. Judge Washington stood up and moved toward the door, then stopped. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I don't even expect you to want me in your life. But I want you to know that seeing you in that courtroom, strong and dignified even when you were being hurt, made me prouder than any case I've ever presided over. You became an amazing woman despite having a father who didn't deserve you. After he left, Zara sat alone with Hope, trying to process everything that had just happened. Her father was alive. Her father was the judge handling her divorce. Her father was Judge Robert Washington, one of the most respected federal judges in the state. And for the first time in months, she wasn't completely alone. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Theo's accountant, panicked by the federal scrutiny, had decided to cooperate with authorities. What he revealed made headlines across the city: tech billionaire under federal investigation for massive tax fraud. The investigation that Judge Washington had quietly encouraged was now front-page news, and Theodore Blackwood's carefully constructed empire was about to come crashing down. The newspaper hit Theodore Blackwood's breakfast table like a bomb. Feds investigate tech mogul for $20 million tax scheme, screamed the headline, accompanied by an unflattering photo of Theo leaving his lawyer's office the day before. Scarlett Rivers dropped her coffee cup, sending expensive porcelain shattering across the marble floor of Theo's penthouse kitchen. 20 million? Theo, you told me it was just some minor accounting issues. It's not true, Theo said, but his hands were shaking as he read the article. Someone had leaked detailed information about shell companies he thought were completely secret. This is just speculation. Yellow journalism. But even as he said it, his phone was buzzing with calls from investors, board members, and business partners. The stock price of Blackwood Industries had already dropped 15% in pre-market trading. "We need to leave," Scarlett said, pacing around the kitchen in her silk pajamas. "I have friends in Monaco. We could." "We're not running anywhere," Theo snapped. "I built this company from nothing. I'm not going to let some overzealous prosecutor destroy it." What Theo didn't realize was that the overzealous prosecutor was actually FBI agent Patricia Mills, who had been building her case methodically with help from Judge Washington's court orders. Every financial document Theo had been forced to produce for the divorce had provided another piece of evidence for the federal investigation. Across town at the hospital, Zara was reading the same newspaper with very different emotions. Nina had brought it with her morning visit, along with fresh clothes and a celebratory coffee. "Your timing is incredible," Nina said, settling into the chair beside Zara's bed. "You filed for divorce right before his whole empire started collapsing." Zara was nursing hope while reading, marveling at how peaceful her daughter seemed despite all the chaos surrounding her birth. "Nina, what does this mean for the settlement?" "It means we need to move fast. If his assets get seized by the federal government, you could end up with nothing. But if we can get the divorce finalized first, I could have a legal claim to half of everything before it gets taken away." "Exactly. And based on this article, Judge Washington seems to have anticipated this. Look at this quote." Nina pointed to a section where a court spokesperson said, "Judge Washington has expedited the Blackwood divorce proceedings to ensure all parties' interests are protected before any potential federal action." Zara felt a warm feeling in her chest. Her father, she was still getting used to that idea, was protecting her even now. Hope finished nursing and looked up at her mother with dark eyes that reminded Zara of someone. It took her a moment to realize they looked exactly like Judge Washington's eyes. "Nina, I need to tell you something. About Judge Washington." Before she could explain, there was another knock on the door. This time it was Dr. Peterson with discharge papers and a man Zara didn't recognize. "Mrs. Blackwood, this is Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. He'd like to ask you a few questions about your husband's business practices." Detective Rodriguez was a kind-faced man in his 40s who immediately apologized for bothering a new mother. "I promise to keep this brief. We're investigating your husband's companies, and we wondered if you had any knowledge of irregular financial activities." Zara shifted Hope to her shoulder. "Detective, I worked at our architecture firm, but Theo handled all the financial aspects. I designed buildings, he managed money. Did you ever notice large cash payments to employees? Expensive purchases charged to the business that seemed personal in nature?" Zara thought about all the gifts Theo had bought Scarlett. The jewelry, the trips, the designer clothes. He did make a lot of purchases that he claimed were business expenses. But I assumed they were legitimate. "What kind of purchases?" "Jewelry, clothing, trips to expensive resorts. He said they were for client entertainment." Detective Rodriguez made notes. "Would you be willing to testify to that if needed?" "Detective," Nina interrupted, "my client just gave birth. Any formal testimony can wait until she's recovered." "Of course. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sorry you're going through this. We believe your husband has been using company funds for personal expenses for several years. The good news is that as his spouse, you may have legal protection from his debts." After the detective left, Zara finally told Nina about Judge Washington's revelation the night before. Nina's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. "He's your father? Judge Robert Washington is your father?" "Apparently. The father I thought was dead has been a federal judge for 20 years. Zara, this is huge. This explains so much about how your case has been handled. You think he's showing favoritism? I think he's making sure justice is done. There's a difference." Meanwhile, across the city, Scarlett Rivers was having her own crisis. She had called her father, demanding that he send money immediately. "Daddy, I need a loan. A big one." Richard Rivers, owner of a successful restaurant chain, was not in the mood for his daughter's dramatics. "Scarlett, you're 26 years old. When are you going to start supporting yourself?" "I am supporting myself. Theo takes care of me." "The same Theo who's apparently a criminal?" "Scarlett, I saw the news. Get away from that man before you get dragged down with him." "I can't just leave him. We're in love." "You're in love with his money. Real love doesn't involve hitting pregnant women in courtrooms." The mention of the courtroom incident made Scarlett wince. That moment of rage had cost her more than she realized. Videos of her slapping Zara had gone viral on social media, making her the most hated woman in the city. "That was a mistake," she said weakly. "It was assault, Scarlett. And if you stay with Theodore Blackwood, it's going to be the least of your problems." That afternoon, Zara was finally discharged from the hospital. As Nina helped her into the car with Hope, a small crowd of reporters was waiting outside. Mrs. Blackwood, how do you feel about your husband's arrest warrant? Arrest warrant? Zara stopped walking. What arrest warrant? A reporter pushed a microphone toward her. The FBI issued a warrant for Theodore Blackwood's arrest this morning. Did you know about his criminal activities? Nina quickly stepped between Zara and the cameras. No comment. Please respect Mrs. Blackwood's privacy during this difficult time. As they drove away, Zara felt her world spinning. Nina, an arrest warrant? When did this happen? I don't know, but we need to get you home and safe. Zara, things are moving very fast now. They were moving faster than anyone realized. At that moment, FBI agents were searching Theo's penthouse, his offices, and his vacation homes. They found evidence of the shell company scheme, documentation of fraudulent tax filings, and records showing millions of dollars in personal expenses charged to business accounts. They also found something else: detailed plans for fleeing the country, including tickets to Switzerland and bank account information for several offshore holdings. Theodore Blackwood wasn't just a tax cheat, he was a flight risk. Judge Washington received the news in his chambers that evening. The FBI had enough evidence to arrest Theo immediately, and they wanted to coordinate with the divorce proceedings to ensure Zara's settlement was protected. Judge, Agent Mills said over the phone, we're going to take him into custody tomorrow morning. Can you expedite the final divorce decree? I can have it ready by tomorrow afternoon, Robert replied. Patricia, make sure his assets are frozen the moment you arrest him. I don't want him hiding anything else. Already taken care of. Judge, thank you for your help with this. Your court orders made our investigation possible. After hanging up, Robert sat alone in his chambers, thinking about his daughter and granddaughter. Tomorrow, Theodore Blackwood would face justice for his crimes. Zara would be free, financially secure, and safe. It was the least he could do for the family he had abandoned so many years ago. But he had no idea that at that very moment, Theo and Scarlett were loading suitcases into a car, preparing to run before the law could catch up with them. The final confrontation was coming sooner than anyone expected. The pounding on the penthouse door started at 5:47 a.m. Theodore Blackwood jolted awake from a restless sleep, immediately knowing that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. FBI. Open up. Beside him, Scarlett Rivers scrambled out of bed, her blonde hair wild with panic. Theo, what do we do? What do we do? But Theo was already moving, grabbing the emergency bag he had packed months ago when the investigation first started heating up. The fire escape. We can get to the parking garage through the service elevator. FBI. We have a warrant. The sound of the front door being breached echoed through the apartment as Theo and Scarlett fled down the back stairwell. They made it to Theo's Ferrari in the underground garage just as federal agents poured into the building above them. Drive. Scarlett screamed as they peeled out onto the empty morning streets. But their escape didn't last long. Agent Patricia Mills had anticipated the possibility of flight, and roadblocks had been set up at every major exit from the city. 20 minutes later, Theo's Ferrari was surrounded by police cars on Highway 285, and his run was over. As he was handcuffed and read his rights, Scarlett started crying hysterically. This is all your fault, she screamed at him. You promised me you weren't doing anything illegal. Ma'am, you're not under arrest, one of the officers told her. You're free to go. But as Scarlett looked around at the police cars, the news helicopters circling overhead, and the crowds of people taking pictures with their phones, she realized that her freedom didn't mean much. She was publicly connected to a federal criminal, caught on camera fleeing with him, and about to be abandoned by the only man who had ever given her the lifestyle she craved. Wait, she called out as they loaded Theo into the police car. What about me? What am I supposed to do? Theo looked at her through the car window with the same cold indifference he had shown his pregnant wife in the courtroom. Figure it out, Scarlett. You're on your own now. The police car drove away, leaving Scarlett standing on the highway shoulder in her designer pajamas, suddenly understanding exactly how Zara had felt when her husband chose someone else over her. Across town, Zara was feeding Hope her morning bottle when Nina burst through the door with her laptop. He's been arrested, Nina announced, setting up the computer so Zara could see the live news coverage. They got him trying to flee the city with Scarlett. Zara watched the footage of Theo being led away in handcuffs, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Relief that he couldn't hurt her anymore. Sadness for the man she had once loved. And a strange sense of vindication that the truth had finally come out. What happens now? She asked, adjusting Hope in her arms. Now we make sure you get everything you're entitled to before the government seizes his assets. Judge Washington has scheduled an emergency hearing for this afternoon. This afternoon? Nina, I just got out of the hospital yesterday. I know, but time is critical. The FBI is moving fast and we need to move faster. The emergency hearing was unlike anything the courthouse had ever seen. Media trucks lined the street, reporters crowded the steps, and security was tight as Zara arrived with Nina and baby Hope. Judge Washington took one look at his daughter holding his granddaughter and felt his heart break all over again. She looked exhausted, overwhelmed, and alone despite being surrounded by lawyers and supporters. Your Honor, Nina began, given Mr. Blackwood's arrest this morning on federal charges, we request immediate finalization of the divorce decree and asset division. Theo's lawyer, Richard Sterling, stood up looking haggard. Your Honor, my client is innocent until proven guilty. These charges don't affect the validity of the marriage or the asset division. Mr. Sterling, Judge Washington said coolly, your client was arrested while attempting to flee the country with millions of dollars in potentially fraudulent assets. This court has a responsibility to ensure that Mrs. Blackwood's settlement is protected. He turned to the FBI agent who was present as a witness. Agent Mills, what is the status of Mr. Blackwood's assets? Your Honor, we have frozen approximately $150 million in accounts that appear to contain proceeds from fraudulent activities. However, there are legitimate business assets and personal property that are not part of the criminal investigation. And what is the estimated value of those legitimate assets? Approximately $65 million, Your Honor. Judge Washington nodded. Mrs. Blackwood is entitled to 50% of all marital assets, including both legitimate and illegitimate holdings, as these were acquired during the marriage with her unknowing participation. Sterling objected. Your Honor, you can't award my client's wife proceeds from criminal activity. I'm not awarding her proceeds from criminal activity, Mr. Sterling. I'm ensuring that she receives her legal share of marital assets before those assets are seized by the federal government. There's a significant difference. What followed was a carefully orchestrated legal maneuver that Judge Washington had planned for weeks. The legitimate assets were immediately transferred to Zara's name, including the family home, vacation properties, and her half of their architecture firm. The court also awarded her substantial alimony and child support, to be paid from accounts that had not been frozen. By the end of the hearing, Zara was worth approximately $32 million, and more importantly, she was completely free from Theodore Blackwood. As the courtroom cleared, Judge Washington asked to speak with Zara privately in his chambers. How are you holding up? He asked, his formal judicial demeanor softening as he looked at Hope sleeping in her carrier. I'm not sure, Zara admitted. This morning I was worried about paying rent on my apartment. Now I'm a millionaire and my husband is in federal prison. Ex-husband, Judge Washington corrected gently. The divorce is final as of 1 hour ago. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, grandfather and daughter getting to know each other while Hope slept peacefully between them. Judge Washington, Zara began. Robert, he corrected. Or Dad, if you ever feel comfortable with that. But Robert is fine. Robert, I need to ask you something. Did you help me because you felt guilty about abandoning me, or because it was the right thing to do? Robert considered the question carefully. Both. I helped you because Theodore Blackwood was committing crimes that needed to be prosecuted, and because you deserved justice after what he did to you. But I also helped you because I've spent 28 years trying to figure out how to make up for the worst mistake of my life. You can't make up for missing my entire childhood. No, I can't. But maybe I can be here for your daughter's childhood. If you'll let me. Zara looked down at Hope, then back at the man who had just given her both justice and security. I think Hope would like to know her grandfather. Meanwhile, Scarlett Rivers was discovering what life was like without Theodore Blackwood's credit cards. The taxi she had called from the highway had taken her to her downtown apartment, where she found eviction notices taped to her door. It turned out that Theo had been paying her rent with company funds that were now frozen. Her credit cards, which Theo had been paying, were all maxed out. Her bank account had exactly $237 in it. For the first time in her adult life, Scarlett Rivers was going to have to get a job. She called her father, but he refused to help. I warned you about that man, Richard Rivers told her. You made your choice. Now deal with the consequences. She called her friends, but most of them stopped returning her calls the moment her meal ticket disappeared. By evening, Scarlett was sitting on the floor of her empty apartment, eating ramen noodles and watching news coverage of Theo's arrest. The reporter mentioned that his ex-wife had been awarded a substantial settlement and was moving forward with her life and new daughter. Scarlett threw the remote at the television screen. Zara had everything now: money, freedom, a beautiful baby, and a future full of possibilities. All because Scarlett had been stupid enough to slap a pregnant woman in front of a federal judge. The irony was not lost on her. She had destroyed her own life in the moment she thought she was claiming victory. But Zara wasn't thinking about Scarlett Rivers anymore. She was at home with Hope, finally able to relax for the first time in months. The apartment that had felt so lonely and temporary now felt like the beginning of something new. Nina was helping her set up the nursery when the doorbell rang. It was a delivery man with another flower arrangement, this one even more beautiful than the last. The card read, "Congratulations on your new beginning. Justice has been served. Your father." Zara smiled, holding the card against her chest. For the first time in her life, she had a father who was fighting for her instead of abandoning her. And Hope would grow up knowing that sometimes justice really does prevail. 6 weeks after Theodore Blackwood's arrest, the full scope of his crimes was front-page news across the nation. The FBI's investigation had uncovered what they called one of the most sophisticated tax evasion schemes in recent history, involving shell companies in 12 countries and over $40 million in unpaid taxes. Zara read about it while sitting in her new home office, Hope sleeping in a bassinet beside her desk. The Victorian house she had purchased in the historic district was nothing like the cold modern penthouse she had shared with Theo. This place had character, warmth, and most importantly, it was entirely hers. Her architecture firm was thriving again. Without Theo's name attached to it, clients were eager to work with Washington Designs. She had 3 major projects in development and a waiting list of potential clients. "You're glowing," Nina observed, settling into the chair across from Zara's desk with coffee for both of them. "Motherhood and freedom suit you." "I feel like I can breathe again," Zara admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "For months I felt like I was drowning, and now you're swimming in $32 million. They both laughed. The money still felt surreal to Zara. She had grown up in a middle-class household where her mother worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. Having this kind of wealth was overwhelming, but she was determined to use it wisely. "Speaking of money," Nina said, "I have news about Theo's sentencing." Zara looked up from the blueprints she had been reviewing. "Already?" "He took a plea deal. 20 years in federal prison, and he has to pay back every dollar he stole plus penalties." The judge called it one of the most egregious examples of greed and fraud he had ever seen. 20 years. Zara tried to process what that meant. Hope would be in college before her father got out of prison. She would grow up knowing her father as a criminal, not the successful businessman Zara had once believed him to be. How do I explain this to her when she's old enough to ask? Zara wondered aloud. You tell her the truth. That her father made bad choices, but that she is not responsible for his actions. And that she has a mother who fought to give her a good life despite everything. Hope stirred in her bassinet, making the soft baby sounds that always made Zara's heart melt. At 6 weeks old, she was already showing signs of being a strong-willed little girl. She had her mother's dark eyes and her grandfather's stubborn chin. There's something else, Nina said, her tone becoming more serious. Scarlett Rivers called my office. Zara's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. What could she possibly want? She wants to meet with you. She says she has something important to tell you about Theo. Absolutely not. Zara, hear me out. She sounded broken, desperate. She's been working at her father's restaurant, living in a studio apartment, driving a 15-year-old Honda. The woman who slapped you in court has lost everything. Good. I'm not saying you should feel sorry for her. I'm saying she might have information that could help with Hope's future. What if she knows about more hidden assets? What if there are things about Theo that you need to know for Hope's sake? Zara looked down at her sleeping daughter. The idea of meeting with Scarlett made her sick, but Nina had a point. If there was anything that could benefit Hope's future, didn't she owe it to her daughter to find out? One meeting, she said finally. In a public place. With you present. And if she tries anything, she won't. Zara, she's not the same person who attacked you in court. Life has humbled her significantly. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at a coffee shop downtown. Zara arrived early, choosing a table near the back where they could talk privately but still be visible to other patrons. Hope was with her grandfather for the afternoon, something that had become a regular arrangement as Robert Washington tried to make up for lost time. When Scarlett walked in, Zara almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the designer clothes, perfect makeup, and confident stride. This version of Scarlet Rivers wore a simple black dress that looked like it came from a discount store, minimal makeup, and the kind of tired expression that comes from working double shifts and sleeping on friends' couches. "Zara," Scarlet said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. Nina said you had information about Theo." "I do. But first, I need to apologize for what I did in court. There's no excuse for hitting you, especially when you were pregnant. I was angry and scared and I took it out on you when you didn't deserve it." Zara studied Scarlet's face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But the woman across from her seemed genuinely remorseful. "Okay," Zara said carefully. "I accept your apology. Now what information do you have?" Scarlet reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. "Theo gave me this the night before he was arrested. He said it contained financial information that might be useful if things went bad. And you're just giving it to me?" "I had it analyzed by a computer expert. It contains records of bank accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. Accounts with your name on them." Zara's heart stopped. "My name? Theo was setting you up, Zara. If he got caught, you were going to be his fall guy. The accounts are in your name, but the money came from his fraudulent activities. He was going to claim you were the one hiding assets overseas." The coffee shop seemed to spin around Zara. "He was going to frame me? The FBI doesn't know about these accounts yet. If they find them and see your name, they might think you were involved in the tax evasion." Nina, who had been listening in shocked silence, finally spoke. "Scarlet, why are you telling us this? You could have used this information to make a deal with the FBI." Scarlet looked down at her hands. "Because I destroyed this woman's life once already. I'm not going to let Theo destroy it again, even from prison." She looked back at Zara. "I know you have no reason to trust me or help me. But I also know what it's like to have the man you love betray you. Theo used me just like he used you. The only difference is you were smart enough to get out before you lost everything." Zara took the flash drive, her hands shaking slightly. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Give it to the FBI. Let them know Theo was setting you up. Clear your name before he can try to drag you down with him." "And what do you get out of this?" Scarlet's laugh was bitter. "Nothing. I get nothing out of this except maybe the knowledge that I did one decent thing in this whole mess." After Scarlet left, Nina and Zara sat in the coffee shop processing what had just happened. "She just saved your life," Nina said finally. "If the FBI had discovered those accounts during their ongoing investigation, I could have been charged as a co-conspirator," Zara finished. "Even with all the evidence that I didn't know about Theo's crimes, having my name on hidden bank accounts would have looked incredibly suspicious. Zara, we need to get this to Agent Mills immediately." That afternoon, they met with FBI agent Patricia Mills at the federal building. When Agent Mills saw the contents of the flash drive, her expression turned grim. "Mrs. Blackwood, your ex-husband was definitely planning to implicate you in his crimes. These documents show a pattern of using your identity without your knowledge. He was building a case that you were the mastermind behind the overseas accounts. But that's not true. We know that now. And thanks to this evidence, we can prove it. Mrs. Blackwood, you just avoided a very serious legal problem." As they left the federal building, Zara thought about Scarlet Rivers working in her father's restaurant, probably earning minimum wage and living in a studio apartment. The woman who had once slapped her in court had just saved her from potential federal prosecution. "I want to do something for her," Zara said suddenly. "Zara, you don't owe her anything." "Maybe not. But she didn't have to give me that flash drive. She could have kept quiet and let me take the fall. Instead, she gave up her only bargaining chip to help me." "What are you thinking?" Zara was quiet for a moment, watching the city go by through the car window. "I'm thinking that sometimes people deserve a second chance. And I'm thinking that hope should grow up in a world where people do the right thing, even when it's hard." That evening, Zara called her accountant and had him transfer $50,000 to an account in Scarlet Rivers' name. It wasn't enough to make Scarlet rich, but it was enough to give her a fresh start somewhere far from the wreckage of her life with Theodore Blackwood. The attached note simply said, "Thank you for doing the right thing. Use this for a new beginning." See. When Scarlet received the money, she cried for 3 hours. Then she packed her few belongings, quit her job at her father's restaurant, and moved to Portland, Oregon, where no one knew her name or her story. She enrolled in community college to study nursing, got a small apartment near campus, and started building a life based on her own efforts rather than someone else's money. Meanwhile, Zara was building her own new life with hope in her father. Every week brought new projects, new opportunities, and new possibilities. Theodore Blackwood, sitting in his federal prison cell, had no idea that his final attempt to destroy his ex-wife had failed, or that the woman he had discarded was thriving while he counted the days until his potential release in 20 years. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of irony. 1 year later, Zara stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office building, watching the city wake up below. Washington Designs had grown from a struggling one-woman operation to one of the most sought-after architectural firms in the state. The building she had designed and purchased with her settlement money was a testament to her vision, modern yet warm, innovative yet timeless. Hope babbled happily in her high chair, playing with colorful blocks while Zara reviewed the morning schedule. At 13 months old, she was walking, talking, and showing signs of the same stubborn independence that had carried her mother through the darkest period of her life. "Mama work," Hope said clearly, pointing at the blueprints spread across Zara's desk. "That's right, baby girl. Mama works." The intercom buzzed, and Zara's assistant announced that Judge Washington had arrived for their weekly lunch date, a tradition that had started 6 months ago and had become one of the highlights of both their weeks. Robert Washington entered the office carrying a bouquet of flowers and a small wrapped gift. "Good morning, beautiful ladies," he said, kissing Zara's cheek and scooping Hope into his arms. "Grandpa," Hope squealed, clapping her hands. The word still made Robert's eyes water. He had missed Zara's first word, first steps, first day of school, and every other milestone of her childhood. But he was determined not to miss any of Hope's. "What's the occasion?" Zara asked, nodding toward the gift. "Can't a grandfather spoil his granddaughter?" Robert replied, but his expression was serious. "Actually, there is something to celebrate. Theodore Blackwood's appeal was denied this morning." Zara felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the legal proceedings were finally over. Sadness that Hope's father would spend the next 19 years in prison. And a strange sense of closure that she hadn't expected to feel. "How do you feel about it?" Robert asked, studying his daughter's face. "Like a chapter of my life is finally closed," Zara said honestly. "Theo made his choices and now he has to live with the consequences. I can't change what he did, but I can control how I move forward." They were interrupted by another buzz from the intercom. "Ms. Washington, there's a reporter here from Architecture Today. They want to interview you about the Morrison Project." The Morrison Project was Zara's latest triumph, a low-income housing development that combined beautiful design with affordability and sustainability. It had been featured in several national magazines and had earned her recognition as one of the top young architects in the country. "Tell them I'll be right there," Zara said, then turned to her father. "Rain check on lunch?" "Of course. Hope and I will go to the park. Won't we, sweetheart?" As Robert left with Hope, Zara took a moment to appreciate how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been a betrayed wife with no idea how she would support herself and her unborn child. Now she was a successful businesswoman, a loving mother, and a daughter who had finally found her father. The interview went well, with the reporter praising both her innovative designs and her commitment to social responsibility. When asked about her inspiration for the Morrison Project, Zara thought about her mother, who had worked 2 jobs to provide for her, and about all the single mothers who deserved beautiful, affordable homes. "I design buildings for people who might not otherwise have access to good architecture," she explained. "Everyone deserves to live somewhere beautiful." After the reporter left, Zara returned to her office to find an unexpected visitor waiting for her. Detective Rodriguez, the financial crimes investigator who had interviewed her in the hospital, was sitting in her reception area with a serious expression. "Detective Rodriguez," Zara said, her heart racing. "Is everything okay?" "Ms. Washington, I'm here with good news. The federal government has recovered additional assets from your ex-husband's criminal activities. Assets that rightfully belong to you and your daughter." He handed her a folder containing financial documents. "We found another $8 million in accounts that Mr. Blackwood had hidden. Since these were acquired during your marriage with funds that should have been legitimate marital assets, the court has awarded them to you." Zara stared at the papers in shock. $8 million more? "There's also this," Detective Rodriguez said, pulling out another document. "Mr. Blackwood had a life insurance policy worth $5 million, with you listed as the beneficiary. Since he's serving a life sentence, the policy has been activated and the funds released. $13 million additional dollars." Zara sat down heavily, trying to process the information. "Detective, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. This money was stolen from the government and should have been part of your marital assets anyway. You're entitled to it." After Detective Rodriguez left, Zara called Nina with the news. $45 million total, Nina said, her voice filled with amazement. Zara, you're not just comfortable. You're wealthy. Really, truly wealthy. It doesn't feel real. What are you going to do with it? Zara looked around her office, thinking about the Morrison project, about her mother's struggles, about all the women who had suffered what she had suffered. I'm going to start a foundation, she said suddenly, for women leaving abusive relationships. Women who need legal help, financial support, job training. Women who need hope. That's beautiful, Zara. What will you call it? Zara looked at the photo on her desk, Hope laughing in her grandfather's arms at the park. The Hope Foundation. Because sometimes hope is all you have, but it's also all you need. That evening, Zara sat in her home office working on the foundation's mission statement while Hope played with her toys nearby. The Victorian house felt peaceful and safe, filled with the kind of warmth that comes from building something real and lasting. Her phone rang and she was surprised to see Linda Martinez's name on the caller ID, her mother, who had remarried when Zara was 12. Mom? Zara, honey, I just saw the news about the additional money. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually. And how are things with your father? The question still felt strange. For most of her life, Zara had believed her father was dead. Learning that he was alive, successful, and desperately sorry for abandoning her had been one of many shocks in a year full of surprises. He's wonderful with Hope, Zara said honestly. And he's trying hard to make up for lost time with me. Do you think you can forgive him? Zara considered the question. A year ago she might have said no. The pain of growing up without a father, of believing she wasn't worth staying for, had run deep. But watching Robert with Hope, seeing how much he regretted his choices, and feeling the security of finally having family support had changed her perspective. I think I already have, she said. Not because what he did was okay, but because holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting him. After hanging up, Zara opened her laptop and began writing. The Hope Foundation is dedicated to supporting women and children who are rebuilding their lives after domestic abuse, betrayal, and abandonment. We believe that every woman deserves justice, security, and the chance to create a better future for herself and her children. As she typed, Hope crawled over and pulled herself up using Zara's chair, looking at the screen with curious eyes. What do you think, baby girl? Should mommy help other mommies who are scared and alone? Hope clapped her hands, which Zara took as enthusiastic approval. The foundation would officially launch in 6 months, with an initial endowment of $20 million. It would provide legal services, financial assistance, job training, and childcare for women escaping dangerous situations. It would also fund research into domestic violence prevention and support legislation protecting victims' rights. But tonight, Zara was content to sit in her peaceful home with her healthy daughter, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to build something meaningful from the ashes of her old life. Theodore Blackwood sat in his prison cell, counting the days until his release in 2044. He had no idea that the woman he had betrayed was using his stolen money to help other women escape the kind of treatment he had inflicted on her. He also had no idea that his daughter was growing up strong, loved, and surrounded by people who would teach her that she deserved better than what he had given her mother. Justice, it turned out, wasn't just about punishment. Sometimes it was about transformation, healing, and the decision to build something beautiful from something broken. 2 years after the courtroom slap that changed everything, Zara Washington stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom in the Marriott downtown, looking out at an audience of 500 women, lawyers, judges, and advocates. The Hope Foundation's second annual gala was the social event of the season, but more importantly, it was a celebration of triumph over adversity. 2 years ago, Zara began, her voice strong and clear, I was a pregnant woman sitting in a divorce court, believing my life was over. I had discovered my husband's affair, lost my business partnership, and was facing single motherhood with no idea how I would survive. In the audience, Judge Robert Washington sat at the head table with Hope on his lap. The 2.5-year-old was wearing a tiny pink dress and kept waving at her mother on stage, causing ripples of laughter throughout the crowd. I thought that day in court was my ending, Zara continued, but it turned out to be my beginning. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best thing that will happen to you. The Hope Foundation had exceeded everyone's expectations. In 2 years, it had helped over 3,000 women escape abusive relationships, provided legal representation for victims of domestic violence, and funded job training programs that had placed 89% of participants in stable employment. The foundation's crown jewel was Hope Village, a residential facility that provided safe housing, childcare, education, and counseling for women and children starting over. The beautifully designed complex, created by Zara's architectural firm, looked more like a college campus than a shelter, giving residents dignity along with safety. "Tonight, I want to introduce you to someone special," Zara said, gesturing toward a woman in the front row. Maria Santos came to Hope Village 6 months ago with her 3 children, fleeing an abusive marriage with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Maria stood up, her face radiant with confidence that hadn't been there when she first arrived. "Tonight, I graduate from our job training program as a certified medical assistant," she announced to thunderous applause. "Next month, I start work at Children's Hospital, and my family moves into our own apartment." As Maria sat down, Zara felt the familiar surge of purpose that had driven her work for the past 2 years. This was why she got up every morning, why she poured her heart into every project, why she had turned her pain into power. "The Hope Foundation exists because I learned that justice isn't just about punishment," Zara said. "It's about transformation. It's about taking what was meant to destroy you and using it to build something that lifts others up." After the speeches and the auction and the networking, Zara found herself on the hotel's rooftop terrace, breathing in the cool evening air. Hope had fallen asleep in her grandfather's arms hours ago, and they had taken her home, leaving Zara to enjoy the rare moment of solitude. "Excuse me?" Zara turned to find a man approaching her, tall, dark-skinned, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She recognized him as Dr. Michael Chin, the pediatrician who served on Hope Village's medical advisory board. "Dr. Chin, right? Thank you for everything you do for our families." "Actually, I wanted to thank you," he said, joining her at the railing overlooking the city. "What you've built is extraordinary. And that speech tonight, it was beautiful." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights sparkle below them. "Can I ask you something personal?" Michael said. "How do you do it? How do you take something so painful and turn it into something so positive?" Zara considered the question. "I think about my daughter," she said finally. "I want her to grow up in a world where women support each other, where justice exists, where second chances are possible. The foundation isn't just about helping other women, it's about creating the world I want Hope to inherit." "That's remarkable. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She gave me a reason to fight when I didn't think I had any fight left." They talked for another hour about the foundation's work, about their shared commitment to helping others, about books and travel and dreams for the future. When Michael finally asked if he could take her to dinner the following week, Zara realized it was the first time in 3 years that a man had asked her out and she actually wanted to say yes. "I'd like that," she said, surprised by her own enthusiasm. As she drove home through the quiet streets, Zara reflected on how much had changed since that terrible day in court. Theodore Blackwood was serving year 3 of his 20-year sentence, and according to prison records he had never once asked about his daughter. Scarlett Rivers was finishing nursing school in Portland and working part-time at a clinic for low-income families, apparently having found purpose in helping others rather than using them. Zara's relationship with her father had grown stronger every month. Robert had become the hands-on grandfather he had never been a father, attending every milestone and celebration in Hope's young life. He had also become one of Zara's closest advisors, helping her navigate both the legal and emotional complexities of running a foundation. Most importantly, Zara had learned to trust herself again. The woman who had once doubted her worth, who had accepted betrayal as something she somehow deserved, had been replaced by someone who knew her value and refused to settle for less than she deserved. When she arrived home, she found Robert reading in the living room while Hope slept upstairs. "How was the rest of the gala?" he asked, looking up from his book. "Perfect. We raised over $2 million tonight." "That's wonderful. And that young doctor seemed very interested in talking to you." Zara laughed. "Were you spying on me?" "I was being a protective father. It's a new role for me, but I'm getting the hang of it." They talked quietly about the evening, about the foundation's upcoming projects, about Hope's latest achievements. As Robert prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Zara, I need you to know something. Watching you build this life, seeing the woman you've become despite everything, it's the greatest privilege of my life. I'm so proud to be your father." After he left, Zara checked on Hope, who was sleeping peacefully in her crib, surrounded by stuffed animals and children's books. The nursery was painted in soft yellows and greens, with hand-painted murals of gardens and butterflies that Zara had created herself. "Sweet dreams, baby girl," she whispered, kissing Hope's forehead. "Tomorrow is going to be another beautiful day." As she got ready for bed, Zara thought about the dinner date with Michael, about the foundation's growth, about all the possibilities that lay ahead. For the first time in years, she was excited about the future, not just surviving it, but embracing it. The woman who had been slapped in a courtroom while pregnant and abandoned had become a successful entrepreneur, a devoted mother, a generous philanthropist, and a daughter who had found her way back to family. She had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose, her betrayal and turned it into strength, her ending and made it into a beginning. In his prison cell, Theodore Blackwood marked another day off his calendar, unaware that the woman he had tried to destroy was thriving beyond his wildest imagination. Unaware that his daughter was growing up surrounded by love, security, and the knowledge that she was worthy of respect and devotion. Justice had indeed been served not through revenge or retaliation, but through the simple act of refusing to let someone else's choices define her worth. Zara Washington had won not by destroying her enemies, but by building something beautiful from the ruins of what they had tried to take from her. And tomorrow she would wake up ready to help other women do the same thing.